was a part of God's design and plan for the future of the human race and as the ultimate expression of love. That's why it was something of sanctity and holiness, how it's understood and how it's used within marriage. And even in this case, that because of the sanctity of marriage, and this part of the sanctity, that's why it belongs, it's most proper in this context. Outside of that is the distortion of love. And so even if a relationship begins, like he says here, with the people who truly love each other, so love is patient, love is kind, and love is able to wait for the right time and in the right manner. And that's why when it's distorted, there are many problems. Most of the problems that we see, whether in relationships or in marriage, is usually related to this question. And I know in America and in the Western world, it's a very sex-driven culture. And that's why the distortion of love and of that relationship is outside of its proper order, proper balance. And even when we see it, when there is that patience and that sacrifice, or the scenes of the sacrifice, you see the blessing in marriage and in that relationship that goes from generation to generation. So it harms the self. It also, I've seen many couples that everything is moving in the right direction, and once they make this mistake, they actually don't end up married. And so that is very difficult for them and for their families, and it's almost a loss of the blessing that they had for that future for them and for others.
I was just asking a saying of the fathers, no, but there is research, I think, that says more marriages fail whenever there's premarital sex involved. So statistically speaking, it's a recipe for a failed marriage.
I'm going to answer this one because it's related to the talk this morning. So goodness is defined as God. How can we define goodness, good actions from a secular view? How can we explain why an unbeliever doesn't act as goodness? You can't. And you shouldn't be afraid to say that. That's actually something that I've talked to a lot of atheists about, where I've told them to their face, where when they say, because usually it is like, I can be a good person and not believe in God. And my responsibility is actually, no, you can't. Because you don't have a definition, not because I'm a jerk, right? So, like, I have a definition of good, and so I can say to somebody based on the definition of good is. The best that a secular view can do with morality, and I'm not saying that sarcastically, the part they can do is give it a utilitarian definition, which means defining good by what's most useful to the most number of people. But that's not objective, right? That's just a societal vote on something convenient for the masses. And so you actually can, and that's actually an important thing to bring up, because morality is one of the things to be considered in the pursuit of belief in God, in the sense that there are questions should be asked of why do humans have a sense of right and wrong? They might disagree on what the right and wrong are, but virtually all humans have a sense of right and wrong, and it should be questioned why. Because that's not physical, that's not chemical, and not all of these right and wrong instincts have anything to do with survival, right? Some like love being the most obvious one, right? Of why does anyone love anyone? Because that doesn't necessarily help them survival at all. Why are there people willing to die for other people? That is not a survival instinct, that's the complete opposite, right? And so you should actually consider that in those discussions of saying you actually can't call something good in order that the whole straight line business we talked about earlier, you need to have a ruler to define a curve or to define a ray, right? There has to be a point of origin.
I think the next one is, does requesting in prayer change God's mind or alter the outcome of a situation? Yes. Oh, you want like an explanation, okay. So there is an understanding in Orthodox faith that God's will, providentially speaking, is like for our salvation. He knows what will happen. He even says in Isaiah, I think it's 65:24, and I know we're like live, so I think so not wrong references, but if it's wrong, you guys can look it up. He says, before they call, I will answer. While they're yet speaking, I will hear their voices. So we know that God hears our requests and even answers them before we're speaking, before we ask. Like, I hope you know that God isn't waiting for you to ask for whatever you're going to ask tonight in order to answer. He already heard your prayer tonight, tomorrow, and next week. Because for God, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, God is one moment. The sense of time is a creation. So God exists outside of time. In the Greek, there's two words for time, kairos and chronos. We live in that chronological chronos. But in kairos, God exists above that. So for him, he's not bound to the changes of time that we live in. He anticipates our prayers. In the Old Testament, we see when he is revealing to Abraham what he's going to do, that he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And like, Abraham is like, okay, let's negotiate. So he changes God's mind. Not that necessarily God was like liable to that change, but in the sense that God knew beforehand how the conversation would go, but he still wanted Abraham to be involved. So it's for our sake that we ought to pray, and God will take into consideration our prayers, knowing that they will be offered and they will go into effect. Otherwise, we can just pretend like God knows everything and forget about it. And we were just talking about the prophet Hezekiah, right? King Hezekiah, whenever he asked for, was it 10 or 15 years? 15 years. So there you go. He was going to die. He says, give me 15 more. And he said, okay. So, like, that doesn't qualify for answered prayers. I don't know what that. And so, did God know he was going to give him 15 years? Yes. Would it have happened if he didn't ask? No. You got to pray. And he tells us the persistent prayer in Luke 18, the persistent woman is a perfect model for us to follow. Always persisting in praying. So it's for our sake that we pray, and entering that communion with him, that relationship with him, not just to receive requests, to receive answers for our questions, and for him to respond to our petitions, and even though it does change our.
So, where does our church stand on postpartum organ donation? There's no official stance on this, primarily because the early church did not have heart transplants in the way that in the medical science, the science advancements that we have now was not available back then. I know that pastorally I've dealt with parents who had their child die suddenly in an accident and could not bear to see to sacrifice any further, even though their son or daughter had requested to do so. It was very difficult for the family. At the same time, I've seen one of the youth who was going to die in a matter of weeks, unless someone had donated a heart for him to survive. So we've seen both, and when you see that, it's very hard to say no to soccer. But like I said, there's no official. Most of you are willing and able, and most of your parents are not able or willing. So I think it's going to take some time for us to have a consensus. There's no church canon preventing you from donating. But what the issue that it touches is the sanctity of the body. So that's why, for example, we don't cremate, because the Holy Spirit dwelling in you and sanctifying you. And so that's why after death, after the soul leaves the body, we still believe that your body is holy and to be revered and valued even after that. So that relates to our faith of the resurrection of the body, as we say.
Why we baptize as children if we do not understand what's happening and have not yet been able to consciously accept Christ as our Savior? It's a great question. And you'll have different traditions in other denominations, like the Catholic Church will have something called confirmation, and although it's not officially like an adult baptism, but they do stress that sense of consciously being confirmed and accepting that faith. Now, in the early church, there were adult baptisms, but as the church grew, we realized the value of infants receiving the Spirit, being baptized. But again, baptism, I'm sure the person who asked this is referring to baptism and chrismation, because baptism isn't necessarily the receiving of the Spirit in chrismation, but if we look at both, it's really for our sake, even though we may not consciously understand what we're receiving, we still have the benefit. For example, does a mother say, Habibi, you don't understand how valuable vitamins are, so whenever you get older, you take them. So like, you know what I mean? So we don't wait for children to realize the value of vitamins, but we give them. We don't say, okay, you don't really value the value of your education, so when you get older, you go to school. Like a kid from like kindergarten, even though he doesn't know what's happening or what he's really benefiting from, he still continues to go because his parents put him there. Okay? So it's really the same way, but St. Leaf and the Red Cross has a very good article on this, on the path of salvation. It stresses that the Spirit comes to life in our growth as we become aware of His presence in our life. So there has to be a sort of conscious acceptance and a sort of growth in what we have received so that we can really benefit from what we have. Otherwise, the Spirit just remains idle if we haven't really increase the work and activity of the Spirit in our life.
I really want me to answer that question. Somebody want to answer it? I was going to say to get over it. Why is homosexuality mentioned as a sin in the Bible? Are homosexuals not capable of true romantic love with the same gender? So I'm going to do something, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I sometimes just am. But I'm always going to try and push back at saying, what are you assuming in the way that the question is worded? And I'm going to acknowledge that I'm assuming you're assuming it because I'm not in your mind. Okay? The second half of the question suggests that the reason for saying something is a sin is because we think they're not capable of romantic love with the same gender. So that's the assumption. So saying that something wrong, like this isn't the assumption, right? So are there two people who love the self-denial? So are there two people who deny themselves Absolutely, you can have a deep love between an uncle and an aunt and the nephew and the niece and almost anybody, right? Could you have a romantic relationship between a father and a daughter? You can. It's called incest, and it exists. And they will tell you, we really love each other. What's your problem with consenting adults? So if the question is simply a question of, is it physically possible for people to be romantic with each other? Anyone can be romantic together. People even get romantic with animals, and I'm not being sarcastic. Okay? So this is bestiality, right? And as a matter of fact, these are things being pushed for now, like for legalization. So the whole point of this is actually to say that there is an objective design to something, and that straying from the design, and you're not going to like this word, but I'm not using it in a derogatory way, even though it just simply means in transcription or in translation, an error occurred that had consequences, and something strayed from the way the coding sequence was supposed to be, for those of you who are doing science, right? So it's the same thing with this. So we're not saying a person who has same-sex attraction is a lesser person. We're not saying a person who has same-sex attraction has fake attraction, we don't even know it. Right? Like, we're not flat earth, like, conspiracy theorists, okay? We're simply saying that this is something that went wrong, and so we don't bless it. We're not saying these are people who went wrong, right? We're not saying these are people who are non-humans, or they're bad humans, or they're unacceptable humans, or there's no place for them in the kingdom. A struggling homosexual is the same as a struggling heterosexual. There's no difference before God in those two people. The difference is sanctioning a wrong, even if the wrong is not their fault. I'm not even saying someone raised their hand and said, make me gay. I'm not aware of very many people, actually maybe today possibly, but like before the last decade, I'm not aware of many people who would want to be. Like that's the real. So that's something I'm be clear on what we are and are not saying. So I'm not saying that somebody with these kind of tendencies woke up one morning like, you know, the best thing is I want to be so gay today, right? That's usually not a thing, okay? And for that reason, they deserve much more compassion. They need much more communal support, right? Because if somebody who has same-sex tendency isn't going to be able to get married, you guys have the duty to become their family, actually, right? To open your homes to them, because they're not going to have that same kind of communal support as those of you who don't have those tendencies, and some of you do, right? And so it's mentioned as a sin because sin, as Abuna just defined, right? Sin is falling short of the mark, right? It's saying there is such thing as a right. Sin is to fall anything short of that. Or in a bullseye, it's falling anywhere other than dead center. That's what sin is. And that's all we're saying. It's society that has turned saying that something is not perfect as meaning being judgmental, right? Of saying, therefore I say you're bad, right? If I can ask any of you, how many of you think objectively smoking is good for you? So can I say, oh, therefore you think smokers are bad people? Some of you might, but can I immediately say that because none of you think it's a good idea, therefore you all think they're horrible sinners? Because if you don't think that, then it can easily follow that I can objectively say this falls short of design, and that's why I'm calling it an error, right? And it doesn't matter what the intention of the error is or how well intended they are. We all make errors. I make errors. There's no one doesn't make errors, right? I commit lust. I'm a human being. I've committed lust. I repent. I confess. Right? We're all human. But it's to not sanctify something wrong. It would be like saying, oh, no, Habibi, for you the bullseye is not there. Here's your bullseye. That's this whole fake truth versus real truth, right? So that's all we're saying. We're simply saying it's not the design and that's how we're calling it wrong. We're not making assumptions about the quality and quantity or tastefulness of their romantic relationships.
There are 3 questions on abortion, so I think there's a little bit of repetition. Okay, we can read them. In what circumstance is abortion okay? Would abortion be considered not good if the girl was forced into having sex and she didn't want to do it? And the 3rd one, is abortion acceptable under the circumstance of sexual assault? the main situation where abortion is permitted is in the life, where the life of the mother is in danger. And although there are some mothers who still, even in that case, insist on having the child, we can't discourage, we can't pressure her into having an abortion. At the same time, we can't discourage. So some choose one or the other. In terms of sexual assault, it's much more difficult, and there are some of the young women who decide to continue, and there are others, at the same time, we can't insist that they don't. And it's a very sensitive and delicate issue, and sometimes even they do change their mind. So the main thing is for them to really consider thoroughly, and under those pressures it's very difficult, so that's why I said this. We deal with it on a case-by-case basis with a lot of discussion and counseling as well, because there's a lot of trauma associated with sexual assault, so we can't just force any opinion in either direction. It's very delicate. Right, there, even in the case, there's a certain period where, like the church rules for many centuries have had canons that deal. So if someone does take an abortion, there's a period of time when they're not allowed to take communion, and that has changed over the years. So afterwards, there's an absolution afterwards, and like Abuna was saying, even in the case of the danger of the life of the mother, there's a period, because it's still considered an error, and there's an absolution that's given, versus a permission to do something or a blessing to do something. It's very different.
Boys, feel free to plug your ears. What does the clergy say about girls not being able to partake in the Eucharist during menstruation? Is it really reasonable? I hope I'm not representing that. I'm going to get in trouble if I speak my mind, so I'm going to keep this to the...
I love controversy. First of all, I want you to know, women, that we're not really interested in how bloody you are, okay? And I mean that. So, this is where actually I think there needs to be a lot of understanding from both sides, and I'm able to understand this issue a lot more after taking some courses in New Testament and Old Testament, understanding Mediterranean culture as a whole, okay? So something you might not appreciate is that in the Mediterranean world, the idea of a woman participating in anything when she's bleeding was a thing for them, as like, you don't do that. Even if you weren't a Christian, I'm not even talking about Christianity, this was a very, very cultural rule. If you read some old texts, you'll find, for example, there'll be a random comment set that we're supposed to just understand, where it'll say, oh, and then that night that woman slept not with her husband, for she had the custom of women. So it was like, oh, so I don't sleep with my husband tonight. It wasn't just about church, it was actually the custom of the people. And so you don't appreciate or understand that in the Western culture because we don't think like that, and to you that's not a big deal. I was like, this is how I am, right? Quite understandably. This is, for example, just so that you kind of get a sense of what this is like for some people. It's not weird in Canada or America to see a sign in front of a store that says no shirts, no shoes, no service. Put that sign up in Kenya, right? And they're like, why? That's so bizarre. Look at how behind they are. We're allowed to come topless. What's wrong with these people? Because there are cultural customs that bind every time and age, right? And so what the church was trying to say when it was regulating these things is that part of the preparation for Eucharist does include physical. What is maybe the debatable point is that something that should be regulated from the top? Yes or no? That's just one discussion. And B, is there variation in culture for what those expressions are? For example, what if somebody came to me for communion wearing his boxers? Right? We have a cultural norm where that would be viewed as disrespectful, and we all know that, right? Versus an exception, okay? If somebody were to come in and say, I got robbed this morning and the idea of not having communion was despicable to me and I really needed to, of course I'm going to give him communion. Because he's not showing contempt, right? This is his situation, right? And so what you need to realize when the church revisited this recently, okay, is that it started off by declaring extremely clearly there is no such thing as physical defilement. That was the first part of what the synod put. Okay? And so they're saying from the get-go, we are not saying that because you bled, and also they mentioned nocturnal emissions, to be fair. So they were saying that we are not saying that by virtue of you having a period, you're disgusting before God. And they emphatically said that. They also did something that the synod does not usually like to do. They put a FOC clause in there, right, which said that with the absolutory public confession discussed with them, exceptions can be made because they understand that there is variation, and that maybe we're not ready to have this full discussion because we have two different cultures that are meeting together. Okay? This is why what the subject said to us in our clergy meeting was step one was to establish with clarity that there is no such thing as ritual impurity. That was step one. He said step two would be then to have the conversation of, can we give a canon to somebody who has something under their control? Okay, so there still remains to be a discussion on that. So I just want to make it very clear that yes, I don't know that I don't have a period, but there isn't this anti-woman movement where you're viewed as these disgusting things that bleed monthly. That's not the mentality behind it. I can appreciate why it's frustrating, and why the tone can change, and that yes, there are people who say the wrong thing. That's why we need to differentiate what is the church really saying versus what is a pop culture thing that's being said, and to have patience with that, because we're not actually the only church on the planet to have that rule. All of the Orthodox churches, including the Eastern, have that rule too. And as a matter of fact, until recent history, I don't even know if they removed it, definitely the Catholics had it too. So this isn't like we're in the Stone Ages in Egypt, the whole world moved on, and we're these horrible people that hate women, right? And even though it might feel like that some days, I don't know, I'm not there. But I just want to make it clear, what is a church stance versus what is a cultural stance, and what is the spiritual way to deal with it, right? And that's why what Nwcyc did with us, actually, was he called on everyone in the diocese, clergy and laity, when they were going to discuss it, to research it, to approach it spiritually. Right? They're saying, what were the canons, and where did the canons come from, and why were they doing it? So the church is simply saying, we are going to agree that you're not sinful, right? That we're not saying that. B, we do think you should care about physical preparedness for Eucharist, which is true, you should. And 3, if this is a rule that is really disturbing you, discuss that with the person who puts for your spiritual canon, and if there is a reason to absolve, then the priest will absolve. So there's also an escape clause, since I hope he won't be fired because he's my bishop. And so I hopefully I'm okay.
Often we can drift away from God, but we still want to have a connection. But we lost the will to pray, etc. How can we push ourselves to reconnect? It sounds like you're already there. But this is very common in the spiritual life, and that's why they would always, the fathers always advise to pray, especially in those circumstances. And prayer is a lot. There are many different types of prayer, and sometimes we limit prayer to, say, like Vaya or liturgical prayer. And this, like when we look in situations in the Bible where the men and women of prayer prayed in most difficult times. There is a period of this feeling, of this drought, peculiar. But I read it once and I was trying to make sure it wasn't a mistranslation. But this emptiness, like this vacuum, that we feel that there is that lack of connection. Isaac the Syrian says that this feeling that God is absent or that is far from us is one of the highest forms in the spiritual life, a trial, a difficulty, that is shows a high relationship, not a low relationship. A feeling of abandonment. But we don't speak about it too much. But sometimes we undergo this experience, especially more in the Western world than maybe our counterparts in the East, in today's world. But it gives a hope for those who feel that there is no hope, or like purpose and meaning where we feel like there isn't one. And that's why when we say, if we thank God in every condition, whatever condition, the same thing that we confess every time we pray, that we will go to God, and we will be with God even when the circumstances don't seem to be favorable. And that's why we don't pray based on feeling, as I want to mention, but it's based on faith.
So the next question, I think, since Abuna Anthony Paul's been already talking about homosexuality, I'm going to have him just pick up.
That's nice. In all honesty, whoever put this, like, hats off to you, like, for your honesty, and I really mean that. I'm not always a jerk. I feel I'm gay, but I don't know what to do, and I feel like I would get judged if I came out. What do you think I should do? Yeah, I agree. Like, I agree with that fear. I understand that fear. Right? I'm not going to understand that we have the most welcoming society, and I tend to see two extremes. Either you're with, sorry for my language, what love and love, right? You're living in hell, or the opposite of, like, that's totally okay. Those are both wrong extremes, right? That's why I think, rather than trying to justify a wrong, right? And I'm not saying this yet to the person, I'm saying this to you guys as a whole group, because now someone from among you is saying, yeah, I am, right? Instead of justify a wrong, say, how do we support? And so earlier I talked about the example of somebody who's born with a predisposition, for example, to drugs, right, or to addiction. We as a society, we don't say that's great. We also don't say deal with it, bro, right? We say that's not great, that's really horrible that you have to go through that, not you're really horrible, right? We're going to research it, let's try and find solutions, let's find a way, and we're here to support you while you also fight. So what I'm saying to all of you is develop that mentality also to those of us among the community, so that they're not afraid of you, so that they're not leaving the church because you don't have love, because you're not being a Christian. So to the person who's saying this, I know that not everybody's there. So I'm not expecting you, when people would ask me at home in the LA diocese about coming out, I always left that up to them. Whereas I just know that this could harm you socially, and that's something you should feel confident about before you do, so that you don't feel ostracized, because that is a possibility. It is a possibility, right? And so I don't recommend it until somebody's kind of dealt with themselves first, because a person who is struggling with same-sex attraction, or who is very confident that they're gay, you're often still struggling with yourself first, even about how to interact with yourself. And so number one, don't identify as gay, and I want to make very clear what I do and don't mean by that. I'm not saying pretend you're straight. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is our society is really big on labels, right? And so when you start giving a label, you start to define yourself based on that label. So I'm going to make up a name. If you're a Corotos who has same-sex attraction, and that's why I'm using same-sex attraction on gay, it's very different saying, hi, I'm Kira, I'm gay, right? Because now you've given this whole persona. You're defining yourself from the lens of your sexuality, which is a very postmodernist, weird thing your generation does. We didn't, okay? And I'm not much older than you. Whereas instead, you can be Corotos who might be amazing at reading, might be really good at music, might be really good at sports, who also has same-sex attraction, and maybe he's a liar too. Who knows? Right? But I'm saying these are just different characteristics about you. These are not the things that define you as a person in front of God. Your definition of a person is that you are a son of God and image and likeness of God, whether you like men or women or both, or animals. For real. None of that changes your status in front of God. Okay? None of that changes how God perceives you. Everything that we have is, imagine someone who's born with diabetes. Does it suck? It sucks. Right? And will there be a period of being angry about it? Probably. Right? Probably there will be. Right? But it's not helpful to spend your whole life saying, I can't do this. This is something where 2 or 3 of us at this table can relate to you with your struggle more than with Joseph, sorry, but is that, me to say that, we're kind of celibate. Okay? So if we were to define ourselves based on sexual activity, if that's what's supposed to give us meaning, then we're kind of screwed. Because we don't do that, right? Whereas I think we're decently happy people. I know I'm having a good time. So there's no hands for saying I hope so. So for this person, make this struggle with yourself too, right? Or who are you? What does that mean? What does it not mean? Because society is going to tell you a lot about what it does and doesn't mean. I would encourage you to open up to a clergy member with whom you feel safe. Okay? Because I understand that not everybody's from the same place. There's a lot of cultural issues involved here. One of the questions below was how do we deal with homosexuals when Egyptians want to kill them all? And so I'm acknowledging, yeah. Right? I remember teaching youth group as a servant in Kitchener, Canada, and one kid being like, oh, my parents told me to spit on them. And I'm like, yeah, we don't do that. So I'm aware that there is this kind of mentality that is a cultural mentality and not a religious one. And I want to make that emphatically clear. Right? Is that you can't say that because somebody in the church did something wrong, therefore the church does this. People do wrong everywhere. Right? And we don't stop going everywhere because of wrong people everywhere. But choose somebody with whom you feel comfortable enough that you can feel secure, that you're not worried about it getting out, that you're not worried about how they treat you, you're not worried about how it affects your service, etc. Open up because you will need support. You definitely need support. I know the LA Diocese thinks to say that there's a lot that we were organizing. I don't know where it's at now since I left, so I'm not in the loop anymore. But we were actually putting together a book about a handbook for servants, actually. We asked 2 members of the community who have same-sex attraction to participate in the writing, right? Like, so that it's not just here's a clergy view, but also people are sort of saying, here's what we wish you to understand about us, here's the things that went really well, here are the things that didn't. So I also want you to be comforted that there is a positive movement in the church too, towards being supportive and towards being understanding and all of that. So to that person, but open their mind for real, and I mean that sincerely from the heart. Open up to someone you think is appropriate. They don't have to be in your city if you're really, really worried about that. Don't define yourself in that way, and recognize and understand that your position before God is completely unaffected and unrelated to what kind of attraction that you have. That is completely irrelevant to your status as a son or daughter of God.
I did not talk. Alright, so Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death. But 1 John 5:17 says, all unrighteousness is sin, and there is sin not leading to death. Contradictions, question mark. So, the Bible is not contradicting itself in this case, because if the person actually reference the entire verse from 1 John 5:17. You will see that that's preceded by like a little explanation as well, without even having to look at the verse in Romans. But even within what St. John is saying, he's revealing two equal truths: that all sin is destructive. So anything that's unrighteous is sin. Anything that's unrighteous is missing the mark. But not every mark that's missed is going to equally remove you from God. So, am I with God if I sleep in and I'm not a virgin? No. Or if I am lazy before I sleep and I don't pray my prayer, am I with God? No. Is it a sin if someone's really bothering me and I don't feel like forgiving them, and they come to ask for me to forgive them? I'm like, I still can't stand you for what you did, and it's not going to happen. So all of those things are sinful and they're unrighteous, but they didn't have the same weight as me murdering somebody? Of course not. So what the scriptures is saying is that those consequences will differ. And there are some sins that further remove me away from God and makes it more difficult for me to return. But anything that is sinful is a departure from God. It is making both realities very clear. That anything that is not God is sinful. Anything that is not in the light is dark, but not all darkness is equally the same distance from the light. And that's what we have to really think about in our life, how far we are from the light. Good. So, Abune, I think Paul also mentioned that this is why I even skimmed over the first reference from Romans. The wages of sin is death. So, death is the result of sin. It's the consequence. Because sin, if understood as missing the mark, and death is that ultimate result, is the ultimate separation, the permanent separation from God. And that's what death is. Not just death in the physical sense whenever the soul and the spirit is separated from the body, but that the spirit is separated from God in eternity, which is eternal death, and that's what sin will ultimately cause.
What does the church think of mental illness? I feel it is stigmatized and not talked about enough, absolutely. And in fact, there is part of it is cultural, because in Middle Eastern region, mental illness is very misunderstood and stereotyped and ignored by even many families. So the church is conscious of all of these issues and deals with many different types of mental illness. Success, anxiety, so there's different types. You mentioned excessive anxiety. There are different levels of it, and definitely at some point there's counseling or medication that needs to be used. And so that's why also it needs the priest and maybe more than one counselor that we get opinions about before to take the proper steps. We're also including this in the theological school as part of the training for not just the future priests, but also many of the servants, and hopefully at some point a lot of the parents, so there's greater awareness of the different types of mental illness and the means to approach it and to understand it better. Because when the family is actively involved in the church, this is the support that they all need. Because it's not just the person who's affected by mental illness, but also their family, friends, and the church. Yes, there is an overlap, like everyone was mentioning, between physical, mental, and spiritual. It's not that we neglect or deny completely the mental element and focus on the spiritual, which used to happen more in the past, but we do have to look at all of the factors and to make the appropriate steps.
I'm going to put my pharmacist hat on. How do I quit my nicotine addiction? So there's Nwcyc, and there's Nicorette. But for real though, those are good options. Speak to your doctor and pharmacist. Nicotine addiction is a real addiction, just like weed's a real addiction. Like there's a chemical thing going on, right? And so you do need to know that, because that is going to be part of your battle. And actually, it's an important thing for you guys to understand. Some things can be stopped cold turkey, some things can't be. Nicotine physiologically can be. There are some drugs that cannot, right? It depends on what it is. But not everybody can. So the beginning is wanting to, right? Because trying to force somebody to quit when they don't want to is not usually helpful. If you don't know why it's wrong, start there, is what I would say spiritually. Because if you don't even know why it's wrong, it's hard to stop it, right? Like, why would I just stop because everyone's saying so, right? But if you know why it's wrong, it's easier. Then choose to get the right help that you need, which might include medical, because like I'm using a pharmacist more now, but like Nwcyc, for example, or Nwcyc in Canada, what it's doing is actually, it's really, really cool. This is why God is really awesome when He designed the body. Is that you have a drug that's pretending to be nicotine, so that when it goes to the brain, it goes to a nicotine wood and says, hey, brain, you got what you were looking for. So now you don't need to crave it. It's actually brilliant. It's amazing how God designed the body. You might get nightmares just with some variation and whatever the fine print is on the commercial. But so the medical might be there. Third is to, and this is true of any spiritual thing, choose your company, right? Like, if the people you chill with are all smoking, you're not going to stop easily, right? Just socially, it doesn't make sense. If the way you guys are chilling together includes that, regardless of who they are and what religion, I don't care. The point is that you are going to do whatever your group is doing. If everyone around you is cussing like crazy, you're going to cuss like crazy. If everyone around you is kids want to smoke it, you're going to smoke. So remove the obstacles that are doing it, or ask them to not do it around you, and to respect that you're trying to stop, right? Would be an important thing. This isn't in order of priority, just so you know. Prayer is a real thing, right? Of saying, God, give me the drive, or give me the will, or give me the strength, right? Do the things that you need to help you. So I would say, look at the reasons, look at your causes, look at the things that you have in your control, look at things you don't have in control, consider medical approach.
Why don't people who commit suicide receive funeral services in the Orthodox Church? This was the biggest deterrent at one point to suicide. I remember even since we were young, that's the one thing that we knew was the limit. But this was before, I would say, the church really understood mental illness and dealt with mental illness, just to follow up from the last question. And this has really been one of the things that is, I know at least in our diocese, really examined thoroughly before making that decision not to offer funeral prayers. This does not mean if someone is not prayed on in the church that we say they're condemned to hell. It's very difficult for the family and for the others, and that by itself needs prayers. That's why some people were thinking of an alternative type prayer or service that can be done, especially for the family. One of the first litanies after the Thanksgiving prayer in the funeral was the litany of the sick. And that was mainly for the people, the family and friends of the one who departed, how to deal with the grief and the suffering of death in general. And also if there's a tragedy involved, whether it's an accident or someone who is suffering from an illness for several years. So it's a challenge. It's difficult for us to deal with, and we don't take those decisions haphazardly. And that's why some people who may know some of the circumstances in the funeral, they'll ask, well, how come this person and not that person? There's a lot that goes into those decisions that we can't reveal most of the time, all of the details either.
So we can take this seriously. Okay, so our tattoo is sin. And then he says, my mom doesn't want me to get a sleeve tattoo. So tattoos are not a sin. Okay? For starters, like we can't just get these labels. Tattoo, like I bet the Pope has a tattoo right here. I don't know if he does. He really have a tattoo? He probably does. I don't know. But I think his Drake doesn't, but half of the clergy have tattoos in the little cross. Okay? So, again, you have to really think about what you're putting on your body. The scripture tells us that your body is the temple of God. And the temple is not just honored, but it is held in such a high reverence that it is a source of blessings. And this is what Christ said when he spoke about the altar and the gifts, and the altar sanctifying the gifts. And so that if your body is a temple, you have to be very careful what you put on it. Right? The temple of God is a place that's fitting only for holy things, only for His Holy Spirit. And even if you look at the way that the church is set, there will be a scheme in the artwork that's up on the church. Like I can't just come and say, I love St. Moses the Black because he's like the model of repentance. I'm going to put him right next to the altar. Like that's the sort of artwork I would like to have in the church. So that sort of order that preserves the sanctity of the church, even in the decorations, is significant for your own body. You can't just decorate your body in whatever way. You can't say, like, I had a near-death experience on this date, and so I'm going to put, like, this date across my chest or something. And so, are you going to hell if you do that? No. But is this something that glorifies God? Is this something that will necessarily speak for your faith? Like all things lawful, but not all things edify. So this is the sort of thing that you have to think about. I mean, all of you have been asking about my ring tattoo. And so, I mean, if you think about the purpose, it's practical. Okay? Is there anything in the Bible that says it's right or wrong? You're not going to see that, but you have to think with some wisdom, spiritually speaking, what the purpose is, the practicality and the holiness of it. And if you really understand your body as a temple, you're going to be much more specific with what you put on it. You're going to be a lot wiser. You're going to choose very selective. You're going to have something that glorifies God. Okay? And in most cases, you'll realize that that's not really necessary. If you need something to speak for your faith, then you got to wonder why your actions don't speak enough for it. Okay? So don't belittle your faith to just an image in your body.
And and it was mentioned in Deuteronomy, I can't remember the chapter, for against tattoos and cuts and marks, which was associated with people who believed in other types of gods or other types of worship, and so that's why God made very clear distinction not to do this to associate with other outside the God of Israel. So this was a mark of the believers.
I'm going to not do this one. I don't mind it, but there's a bunch of questions about confession, and they all have equal, point values. Is your repentance and value called same sin? What if I don't feel comfortable with my public confession? Why do I need to confess to my priest? Is a priest allowed to not forgive someone for a sin when they confess? Is it up to the priest, or does it to forgive everyone? And why do I need to confess to the priest if I'm ready for this before God? So I'm just going to lump those together, if that's okay. Number one, to confess because he said so, and I don't mean that sarcastically, right? Is that there are some things where he just said this is how it is. So in the Old Testament, for example, I did X, and then the animal was killed. And there's many reasons for blood sacrifice. I'm not going to talk about blood sacrifice, we're talking about confession. But one of the main objectives here was for there to be a complete understanding that there was no death for humanity before sin. And and this is trying to, when we were talking earlier, the wages of sin is death, for the person who wrote that question, is saying the consequence of sin is that there was now death, because now there was disease. It was not a punishment, it was a consequence, right? And so in that sense, there needed to be an actual reminder of this transference, that the result of sin was death, and then God is preparing them to understand that I'm going to come and give you a solution for death, which is myself. So in the New Testament, your confession of the sin is not just about you admitting guilt. Sorry guys, I know we're almost done. I know you guys are really tired. It's not just a confession of the sin, say I'm so disgusting, I'm so bad, I did blah, 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 right? We're not that interested in all that. But it's also saying to the priest, God delegated that work to them, right, to function as a witness. And so the priest, during liturgy, transfers it to the Lamb, right? And in liturgy, he says, and like there's a prayer we say after the circuit of incense. So we say, "O Lord, accept the confession of the feet, and the right hand, to receive most of the confessions of your people for the forgiveness of their sins," right? And so there's a transference still from the person to the Lamb, which is Christ. So there's an understanding that you were supposed to die for your sin, right? That was the wage of sin. That's why it says it. That was the wage of sin. However, there has been a solution to that sin, to that consequence, which is Christ himself. And so that's why it does have to be a priest, because he's the only one that was given that authority. For whatever reason, God decided that. That's what he decided, and I'm not excited to hear what wrongs you did, okay? Having said that, to say, "Oh, but I already confessed to God for you," A, he said that's not how I do it. So you can argue with God about that one, and I'm not being sarcastic. But B is also that it's not enough to say little things in your heart, right? Like, imagine you slap your mom across the face, and like, whatever I said sorry in my heart, right? And then your mom is meanwhile really hurt about it, and you're just like, well, she should get it. I said sorry deep. Like, that's not a thing either, right? So part of doing a wrong is acknowledging you're wrong and saying out loud, I made a mistake. And it's not comfortable, but it also does help us heal. If you're not comfortable with your priest, you need to ask what the reason is. Because you might have a valid reason and you might not have a valid reason. They're both really possible, right? It might be that you're not well suited to each other, and that's fine. That's not making Abuna bad and you good, or you bad and Abuna good, right? For example, St. Arsenius and St. Louis the Black, I think I go crazy if St. Arsenius is my former confession, right? Like, he's like a no-nonsense, like, tell you well, actually, no, I really like it actually, but he was a very in-your-face-ish kind of person who's like tough, right? You got St. Moses, who was a way more chill, right? And who could like have shade with you and have a conversation. And they were both they were both right before God. So it may be that you have a personality style that matches with a priest more than another, which is why I would say do your work in finding a father confession, A, and then B, in working on the relationship with father confession. I'll tell you, my father confession growing up in Canada, who was phenomenal. There was a few years straight where I was rational and able to process what was going on, where every time I went for confession, he sat there reading his karosa, and I was going crazy. I was like, hi, I'm right here. Right? Why are you reading that when I'm trying to tell you the deep and dark secrets? Right? And so I got annoyed and I got a little bit disrespectful. And so one day I just stopped talking. And he like peered at me over the karosa, and I was like, when you're done. Yeah, I was pushing it a bit. And he put down his karosa and he goes, go ahead. Right? And so he goes, yeah, you've been doing this one for this long, and you've been doing X, and you've been doing Y, and you've been stopped doing this since the day you confessed to me. And I was like, whoa. It turned out that what Abuna was doing was thinking that I was going to be more comfortable by him pretending not to hear me, so that I wouldn't feel awkward about saying all my things, which was very nice of him. Right? It wasn't what I was looking for, right? But it was what he was doing, and so we had a conversation, right? So there's nothing wrong with being able to say, even I used to say to Abuna, like, that's nice, Abuna, I tried that, it didn't work. And it might be that you're well fitted and like you're not, it's not the end of the world. If the priest judges you, Abuna is right. Okay? And I'm saying that to you from personal experience because I did it by accident. I was saying that to somebody in confession today. Okay? I didn't know I was judging someone. In my zeal, I genuinely didn't know I was judging someone. And all I can tell you is that Lord have mercy on me. It was the worst 6 months after in my life because I lost all grace and the things that I thought I would never do in my life, I was doing. And I was like, Lord, like enough, like I get it, I'm a jerk, just stop, right? Give me the help back. So in the event that your priest does judge you, God have mercy on him. Okay? And know that God's not going to judge you twice. So if I'm going to judge you, well then you're good. You've got it done and over with. Because God's not going to give you, there's no double jeopardy with God. Okay? So it's not common, it's not common. I'm confessing it to my own disadvantage by saying, yeah, I made that mistake. I really didn't know in the sense that I wasn't understanding the context of where the person is coming from. So I'm saying in the event that we err, God deals with us. But the majority of priests, and I thought myself included, which I thought I was really arrogant, is that almost everything we've said, we've heard before a billion times, what we've done ourselves, we're still doing ourselves. Right? Which of us hasn't judged? Which of us hasn't gossiped? Which of us has not lusted? Which of us has not stretched the truth, or looked at bad things, or had whatever the things are that you guys say? We're all human. Right? And in different ways, we've done the same sins. And so that's where the non-judgment comes in from, is because we don't see it. If you look at the absolution that the priest gives you, the whole first half is saying, I am only doing this because you told me. That's actually the beginning. Right? I was saying, you're the one who gave this dignity, you're the one who told the apostles to do it, and because I've received the laying on of hands from the apostles who are usual to do that is the only reason I'm going to do this, and so I'm asking you to please forgive this person, strengthen this person, absolve this person. We're not saying, by the power invested in me by the state of California, I hereby pronounce you absolved. Right? We are saying, God do this, God do this, God do this. And actually, the absolution itself, I mean, I usually personalize it, but the absolution prayer itself says us, not even you, right? The actual prayer is saying, absolve us, purify us, straighten us to act according to your will, right? So understand that part. Can a priest not absolve you? Yes, he can, because God told him yes and no. I don't think in our modern culture, as we were reading right before, that's exercised a lot. And it's not something, hopefully, that a priest wants to do anyway, because the priest was to act as a witness. I'll share one personal experience, I'll pass it on because I'm rambling, I know. There was only once in my life where I had a question mark to absolve or not absolve, I'm going to be very honest. Because I felt this person had total contempt for the body and the blood, and that the person was coming in, not me attributing this way, saying, there's nothing wrong with this, I would fully do it again. And it's something in which God is very clear on. It wasn't just a different view on something. But I didn't know what to do, because I want to understand that in the mystery, it has nothing to do with me or Satan or Joseph. This is God. If both people are looking for that, especially if you are looking for it, okay? And so instead of saying, well, you're not sorry at all, I'm not supposed to be worried in, so you can have confession, I literally prayed and just said, God, I don't know what to say to them. I don't know that this person cares or that they're sorry, and you're asking me to be a witness. And the answer that I received was, ask him. Very simple. So I just looked at the person and said, are you sorry? Or sorry if you're from Seattle, or California. And he was like, well, yeah, I think so. So I was like, okay. Then I was asked to be a witness. So if you're lying to me, well, I'm not responsible. That's going to be between you and God now if you're not. And so all I said to him was, I think you should think about what communion means and reflect on that before you decide to go, but I'm not going to lay a rule on you. Right? If you would like to approach, but you consider. So I'm saying we also pray and we also ask, and we're not looking to deprive people of God. Right? Like this is not what we're looking for. I know that my father confession sometimes did with me, and for me personally, it was a very effective tool. Right? It's not that every single person who says God is punishing you for a sin. Right? But there were some things that when I was starting to do that were extremely dangerous, that were a really big deal. Actually, sometimes when I said, I think it would be better for you to stay away for a little bit until you it was actually very effective for me. Right? And so don't worry about that regard. In the last story that I want to say, my priest used to always say this to me. If your priest sucks, okay, you're still not screwed over. In the story of Samuel the prophet, right, when he's hearing voices at night, which is not really normal, who did he go to ask about what he was hearing? Eli. He went 3 times to Eli. What was the first message of God to Samuel? That priest sucks, and I take him down his kids. Okay? God spoke through the mouth of a rotten priest that he was going to take down for the sake of his servant Samuel. So if you are approaching the mystery, treating it as a mystery, looking for the voice of God, God can speak to absolutely anyone, no matter how qualified or unqualified you think you are, if your faith is there. So no matter where you're at, because you say, well, I don't have this, I can find a guy in my style, etc., no problem. And I'm saying that even in that event, trust in God's goodwill towards you, and you will. He instituted it for you, not for yourself. Sorry.
Oh, if your evidence or your case, you could also comment on this, because I really do feel like this concept is nearly completely absent in our Western society and halfway absent within our church. I think most, at least half of the people in the church don't have a regular life of confession. Or else I think we as priests would be much busier. We had like the same person coming every week. So I think part of the struggle, you could comment on that. What the process of exposing your soul to a physical, real person does in contrast to your own personal confession and repentance in your room. What that process does whenever you're reviewing your darkest secrets to a real person and what it does to your heart, what it does to mold you, build you, and humility of heart.
Well, we used to always tell the children there's 4 stages. So you sit with yourself, like the prodigal son, to evaluate what you did, why you did. And then you confess to God, which is part of that confession once it's acknowledged, that we sinned and fell short of the glory of God. And then if we sinned against any other person, and there's any obstacle, we go and resolve that before confessing, before going to the priest. And technically in the liturgy, we do confess to one another, even the priest, the deacon, because that sin is also against the people of God. So we confess before one another to acknowledge that shortcoming. And if there's anything knowingly or unknowingly that we did, we ask also for forgiveness of one another as part of the community, the people of God. And then we go to the priest for that absolution and direction and advice. And many times, like the woman mentioned, even if there's a shortcoming, I've seen many times in confession, the answer coming from the person in their confession. Like, you've thought about it, you've prayed about it, you've repented, and in the time of the confession, even the solution is coming from their own mouth. In a very precise way, and they convince themselves, like we're really witnessing. We pray the prayer, and they know exactly what God gives them the grace in a very unique and special way. We'll have God willing another session tomorrow for the rest of the wonderful questions, and then do the complying now, and the Zahar, and hopefully we'll get